If the spring party had been this much trouble, how much worse would winter be? To combat one source of potential discomfort, Maomao had sewn several pockets onto her undergarment. Warmers could be placed inside these pockets. She also minced ginger and tangerine rinds, boiling them with sugar and fruit juice to produce candy. When she showed these products to Hongniang, the head lady-in-waiting truly begged her to make some for everyone else. While she was busy working on them, a certain eunuch who had too much time on his hands showed up and demanded she make some for him as well. His assistant seemed sorry and at least helped her with the work. Furthermore, Consort Jiukai let word of Maomao's ideas slip during one of the emperor's nighttime visits. The next day, His Majesty's personal seamstress and chef approached her. She obligingly taught them her methods. She thought perhaps they weren't the only ones who had it tough at these events. Still, the hubbub over such simple ideas suggested how rotely everyone else was approaching the party. When one let oneself become too attached to custom, one ceased to be capable of discovering even the most minor innovations. So Maomao passed the time until the garden party with domestic endeavors. Hongniang, meanwhile, busied herself with attempting to correct Maomao's occasional lapses into less than deferential speech. Maomao appreciated the gesture, but she found the lessons trying. Hongniang, the leader of the other 3 serving girls, was just a bit too attuned to how Maomao really was. When she was finally free, on the night before the garden party, Maomao set about making some medicine with the herbs she had to hand. A small gift just in case. You look absolutely beautiful, Lady Jiukai. Yinghua spoke for everyone and her words were sincere. She guessed that was the emperor's favorite consort. Jiukai had an exotic beauty, dressed in a crimson skirt and a robe of a lighter red color. The jacket she wore was the same red as her skirt. It featured embroidery in gold thread. Her hair was gathered into 2 large rings. These rings were held back with ornate hair sticks decorated with flowers. She wore a tiara perched between the rings of hair. Straight silver hair sticks surrounded the elaborate decoration. They were adorned with red tassels and jade stones. It was a mark of Jiukai's strong personality that she was not outshone by her own clothes, despite the elaborate designs. The consort with the flame red hair was said to look better in scarlet than anyone in the country. The way her eyes shone, green as jade, from within all that red only added to her mystique. Perhaps this was due to the abundant foreign blood that flowed through Jiukai's veins. The skirts that Maomao and the others would wear also used light red to indicate that they served consort Jiukai. Wearing the same color as their mistress, but in a lighter shade, would make her stand out even more. The ladies-in-waiting all changed into their skirts and did their hair. Consort Jiukai remarked that this was, after all, a special occasion. She produced a jeweled box from her own dressing table. Inside were necklaces, earrings, and hair sticks decorated with jade. She said, "You are my own ladies-in-waiting. I have to mark you out, to make sure no little birds try to go flying off with you." Then she bestowed an accessory on each of them, placing it in their hair, on their ears, or around their necks. Maomao was given a necklace to wear. "Thank you, Milord HRK." Before she could properly finish her expression of gratitude, she found herself choked. Yinghua had wrapped her arms around Maomao. "All right, time for some makeup." Hongniang was standing there with eyebrow tweezers and a grin on her face. Was it just Maomao's imagination, or did she look a bit more jovial than usual? The other 2 ladies-in-waiting had items of their own, a pot of lip color and a brush. Maomao had forgotten that the other women had of late been deeply interested in getting her to wear some makeup. He. "I'm sure you'll look lovely." It seemed they had a co-conspirator. Consort Jiukai's laugh was like the ringing of a bell. Maomao couldn't hide her distress, but the 4 waiting women were merciless. "First, we need to wipe your face and get some scented oil on there." A damp cloth was assiduously applied to Maomao's face. But then Yinghua and the others exclaimed in unison, "Huh. Maomao stared at the ceiling, defeated. The girls were looking from the cloth to her face and back again, their mouths hanging open. "I guess the jig is up." Maomao closed her eyes, not best pleased. "We should say something here. The reason Maomao hated being made up was not because she fundamentally disliked makeup. It did not disagree with her in any particular way. In fact, she was quite skilled at its use, not having trouble with it at all. Why then was she averse to it? It was because her face was already made up. Several light stains could be seen on the damp cloth. The face everyone had taken to be heavily freckled was in fact the product of cosmetics. Chapter 16 The Garden Party Part 1. With about an hour to go until the party started, Consort Jaikai and her ladies-in-waiting were passing the time in an open-air pavilion in the gardens. There was a lake hopping with all kinds of carp. The trees were dropping the last of their fiery red leaves. You really saved us. The light of the sun was still plentiful, but the wind was cold and dry. Normally the girls would have been shaking, but with the warm stones under their clothes, they found it wasn't so bad after all. Even Princess Lingley, whom they had worried about, was curled up and cozy in her cradle. The cradle was equipped with a heating stone. Be sure to take out the stone under the princess periodically and change the wrapping, otherwise she might get burned. And be gentle with the candies. Too many of them will make the inside of your mouth feel numb. Maomao had several replacement stones waiting in a basket, along with the princess's diapers and a change of clothes. At the request of the eunuchs, the charcoal grill for heating the stones had already been moved to a discreet position behind the party venue. All right. But still Jaikai chuckled teasingly, and the other ladies-in-waiting also wore wry smiles. You are my lady-in-waiting, remember? Jaikai pointed to the jade necklace. I am indeed milady. Maomao decided to take her words at face value. Gaoshun watched his master solicitously, inquiring after the health of the virtuous consort. Jinchi had a sublime smile and an ambrosial voice. He was practically more beautiful than the consort herself. The consort was widely regarded as exceptionally gorgeous, even though she was still very young. Jinchi's current outfit was different from his usual plain official's garments. The difference was due to some embroidery and some silver pins in his hair. Despite this, he threatened to outshine the consort in all her finery. This situation could easily have made him someone to be resented. However, the consort who was often overshadowed was looking at him with admiration, so perhaps there wasn't a real problem. Gaoshun concluded that his master was truly remarkable. After visiting with the other three consorts, Jinchi finally arrived at Jaikai. He found her in the open-air pavilion on the far side of the lake. It was officially his duty to divide his time equally among all four of the women, but lately it seemed he had been seeing Jaikai quite a good deal. Perhaps it wasn't right to look askance at him for that. She was, after all, the emperor's favourite. But there were clearly other reasons for his visits as well. It seemed his old habit of playing endlessly with his toys had never been cured. Troublesome, Gaoshun thought with a shake of his head. Jinchi bowed to the consort. He praised the beauty of her scarlet outfit. She certainly did look lovely in it, Gaoshun privately agreed. The foreign mystique and her natural allure combined to be practically palpable. Consort Jaikai was perhaps the only person in the rear palace who could truly compete with Jinchi for sheer elegant purity. That is not to say the other women around were not beautiful, and indeed each tried to emphasize her own charms. One of Jinchi's singular talents was his ability to speak directly to those he charmed. Everyone likes to hear their own best qualities praised, and Jinchi was very, very good at it. He never lied either, although at times he refrained from telling the entire truth. He appeared completely nonchalant, but the left corner of his mouth twitched slightly upward. Gaoshun recognized this after many years of service. It was the look of a child playing with his toys. Troublesome. Jinchi worked his way closer to a petite lady-in-waiting, pretending to fawn over the young princess. The girl Gaoshun saw was a stranger. She was an unfamiliar lady-in-waiting, expressionless but seemingly contemptuous of Jinchi. Good evening, Master Jinchi. Maomao was mindful not to let her thoughts show on her face. She wondered if he didn't have anything better to do. Gaoshun was watching, so she wanted to remain calm if she could. Put on a touch of makeup, have we? Jinchi asked indifferently. No, sir, I have not. She had put the slightest dab of red on her lips and at the corners of her eyes. It was hardly enough to consider makeup at all. Otherwise, she was entirely natural. A few speckles remained faintly beside her nose, but they were hardly worth noticing. But your freckles are gone. Yes, I got rid of them. The ones that remained were tattoos she had applied herself with a needle long ago. She hadn't pricked too deep. The diluted pigments would fade within a year. Even knowing they wouldn't last forever, her old man had been less than thrilled that she was doing essentially the same thing they did to criminals. Jinchi said probingly, "You mean with makeup?" "Yes." He knitted his brow and squinted at Maomao. "No," she said. "It was removing my makeup that got rid of them." Maybe I should have just nodded along, she thought. But it was too late for Maomao to change her answers now. It would be annoying to have to explain. "I don't understand what you're saying. It doesn't make any sense." "Quite the contrary, sir. It makes perfect sense. Nobody said makeup could only be used to make things more beautiful. Sometimes married women use the stuff to make themselves less attractive." Maomao had been caking dry clay and pigments around her nose each day. When artfully combined with her tattooed freckles, they looked like discolorations or perhaps birthmarks. No one would have imagined she would do such a thing, so no one noticed. She was just another girl with freckles and splotches on her face. People called her homely. That meant there was nothing particularly special about her, and she didn't stand out from the crowd. She looked average, but just a touch of red pigment could change that impression completely. It could make Maomao seem like a different person altogether. Jinchi held his hands to his head as if he couldn't understand what he was hearing. "But why use makeup that way? What is the purpose?" "Sir," replied the speaker, "to prevent myself from being dragged into some dark alley. Even in the red light district there were some who were starved for women. These men mostly lacked money, could be violent, and many of them had sexually transmitted diseases." The apothecary's shop faced the street, located in part of one of the brothels. Because of this, people sometimes thought it was a display window with an unusual theme. Many people enjoyed indulging their lusts at the time. And Maomao naturally wanted to avoid them. A small, slender girl, and with freckles as well, seemed less likely to be targeted. Jinchi listened to this with astonishment and what appeared to be mounting horror. "And were you ever if you tried?" Maomao, understanding his meaning, scowled at him. "But ultimately, the kidnappers were the ones who got me," she added, speaking with spite. These people considered good-looking women to be the greatest prizes they could send to the rear palace. It just so happened that Maomao had forgotten her makeup that day when she went into the woods to gather herbs. She had been looking for dyes to refresh her fading tattoos. She had almost not been sold. Jinchi put his head in his hands. "I am sorry. This is my failure as an overseer." He did not seem pleased. As the one responsible for so much in the rear palace, he did not like obtaining women in this manner. Jinchi suddenly lacked his normal sparkle. A cloud seemed to hang over him. There is little difference between being sold by kidnappers and being sold to give a family one less mouth to feed, so I do not care. The former was a crime, and the latter was legal. If the person who bought her from the kidnappers claimed they did not know how she had been obtained, they would likely go unpunished. Many women entered the rear palace through this very loophole. Their captors knew that if they sent enough women, enough different kinds, one might catch His Majesty's imperial eye. A portion of the resultant salary increase would then go directly to the kidnapper's purse. As for why Maomao continued to use her makeup here in the rear palace, it was the same reason she had pretended to be unable to write. At this point it no longer mattered. She wasn't quite sure when the right time to suddenly appear with an unfreckled face would be. The momentum had simply carried her along. "You're not angry?" Jinchi looked puzzled. "Of course I am. But it isn't your fault, Master Jinchi." Maomao understood it was foolish to expect perfection from a country's administrators. One could try to protect against floods, so to speak, but some storm would always overwhelm the preparations. "I see, you must pardon me." His voice was flat, almost affectless. How unusually direct of him. Maomao was just about to look up when something jabbed her in the head. "That hurts, sir." This time she did not hide her displeasure when she looked at Jinchi. She wanted to know what he had done. "Does it?" he asked. "I give this to you." He was not wearing his usual saccharine smile but looked caught between melancholy and embarrassment. Maomao touched her hair. It was supposed to be unadorned, but she felt something cold and metallic resting there. "All right, I'll see you at the banquet," Jinchi said. He departed the open-air pavilion with a wave over his shoulder. It was a man's silver hair stick that he had put in her hair. She thought it was one of the accessories he had been wearing. It appeared simple at first, but it was carefully made with delicate designs. She believed it would sell for a good price. Wow, you are lucky, Yinghua said, looking at the accessory with longing. Maomao considered giving it to her. However, the other two ladies wore the same expression, so she wasn't sure what to do. She was just holding it out to them when Hongyang grinned and pressed her hand away, shaking her head. The message seemed to be, do not be too quick to give away a gift you have received. So much for that promise. That didn't take long, Consort Jyokayu said, almost pouting. The consort took the stick from Maomao and put it neatly in the young woman's hair. I guess you are not just my lady-in-waiting anymore. For better or for worse, Maomao was not well versed in the manners and customs of the palace, especially those of its more august residents. She had no idea what the hair stick signified. Chapter 17, The Garden Party Part 2. The party took place at a banquet area set up in the central gardens. Red carpets were rolled out through large open-air pavilions. 2 long tables were placed end to end, with the seats of honor at either end. The emperor himself occupied the central seat of honor. The empress dowager and the imperial younger brother were seated to either side of him. The precious consort and the virtuous consort sat on the east side of the table. The wise consort and the pure consort were on the west side. Maomao thought the seating arrangement seemed deliberately designed to provoke a dispute. It could only fan the flames of hostility among His Majesty's 4 ladies. With the young prince deceased, the emperor's younger brother was now first in line for the succession. Although the imperial younger brother was, like the ruler himself, the son of the empress dowager, he seemed to rarely see the light of day. A seat of honor had been provided for the prince, but it was empty. He was frequently ill and rarely left his room. He also performed no official duties. Everyone had a different explanation for this. Some said the emperor was quite fond of his substantially younger sibling. He wanted to keep him calm for the sake of his health. Others said he wanted to keep the prince isolated and out of sight. Still others believed the empress mother was overprotective. She refused to allow the young man outside. At any rate, none of it had anything to do with Maomao. The food would not be served until afternoon. At the moment, the guests were enjoying musical performances and dances. Consort Jyokayu was attended only by Hongyang. Her other ladies held station behind a curtain and awaited instructions, unless they had some particular business. The Empress Dowager was currently rocking the princess in her arms. The woman exuded a class and unfading beauty. It could not be ignored even with the 4 esteemed consorts around her. She looked so young that, sitting beside the emperor, people could easily have thought she was His Majesty's queen. The Empress Dowager was, in fact, relatively young. Yinghua had told Maomao exactly how young. When Maomao did a little calculating, based on the current emperor's age, to figure out how old his mother must have been when she gave birth to him, it made her deeply suspicious of the previous emperor. Some people had a particular fondness for very young girls, but how should one react when their own ruler shared that preference? In any event, the empress mother had remained strong and given birth to the child. For that at least Maomao respected her. As Maomao was having these thoughts, a gust of wind sprang up. She felt herself shiver. She thought, could they not even bother to set up a tent for us? The curtain behind which she stood was only just enough to keep the attendants out of sight. It did little to block the wind. If Maomao and the other ladies in waiting felt cold with their warm stones, how much worse must it be for the ladies of the other consorts? She could see them shivering very fiercely, and a few were turning their toes inward. She did not think there would be any particular problem with going to the toilet at that moment. However, perhaps certain pretenses just had to be kept up while the other ladies were watching. It was a problem, the way these ladies in waiting felt compelled to play out proxy battles on behalf of their mistresses. The head ladies in waiting, who could have controlled the situation, were busy attending to the consorts. No one was there to stop the subordinate women. At the moment, they seemed like 2 paintings. One could be titled Consort Jyokayu's Forces Confront Those of Consort Lihua. The other could be called The Forces of the Pure Consort Confront Those of the Virtuous Consort. It should be noted that Jyokayu's forces consisted of just 4 women. This was less than half the number of those they faced. The numbers were against them, but Yinghua was striving to make up the difference. What is that, Plain? Are you dumb? Ladies-in-waiting exist for one reason: to serve their mistress. What good would it do them preening and posturing? Apparently there was an argument over their outfits. The ladies across from Maomao and Yinghua served consort Lihua, and as such their ensembles were based on the color blue. The outfits were frilly and heavily accessorized, making them rather more conspicuous than Gyokai's retinue. You are the one who is dumb. If a lady does not look good, it reflects badly on her mistress. But what else would you expect from someone who would hire such a clumsy oaf? The girls from the Crystal Pavilion all set up a giggle. Oops, I think I am being made fun of.